Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're going to talk about new commander skills. That's right, 10.0 is here. 4 years after the last kind of change to the commander skill system, now we've completely dumped all of that, and we're doing it all over again. Every ship class now has its own skill tree, in case you haven't been paying attention. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to spend a little time talking through each of the various class trees and just kind of talking about what ships might be good with what skills and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things you're going to notice as you start going through and respecking all of your captains, one is every individual ship now has a list of little recommended skills, which is kind of interesting because before I don't believe they had done as good a job of kind of singling these out ship by ship. You can see here I've chosen Hindenburg to kind of look through because, well, you know, I am an acolyte of the Church of Hindenburg. But if I were to go pick up, let's say, my Minotaur, for example, that recommended skills list looks completely different because, of course, Minotaur doesn't have HE shells, so anything to do with, for example, fire chance here, grayed out, not recommended, and a completely different list of skills is recommended. So that's kind of noteworthy. I applaud them for trying to kind of make the effort to help folks that maybe aren't as well versed in some of the mechanics along a little bit. So let's dive in and see how things go. So Tier 1 cruiser skills used to be largely about priority target, expert loader, maybe incoming fire alert. There was quite a bit of stuff in that old tree, of course, that wasn't really applicable to cruisers or wasn't really useful. What have they left behind? Well, the first thing they've left behind is what we all used to call Expert Marksman, was a Tier 2 skill, a 2-pointer, now called Grease This Gears, only a 1-pointer. Still a very good skill. For Hindenburg, probably not so useful. I mean, German battery traverse is already pretty good. You see there are sub 26 seconds, the way I have this ship built out. So, this wouldn't be bad. I mean, that would reduce it to 22 and a half seconds. Still, it's better, right? I mean, for 1 point, that's not terrible. You could do a lot worse. I really like this skill. I like that it's cheaper. I think there's a lot. This is just a fabulous skill. The other thing you might notice, I can now build out pick skills, and the changes to the ship stats will show up over here, and I can look at all of that before I ever hit this master button that locks everything in. Huge fan of this. Huge fan of this. Wish they'd done this a long time ago. All right, what else is in this tier? Swift Fish, extra torpedo speed. For a cruiser, I kind of question this. This is not a great cruiser skill, let's be honest. There are a handful of cruisers in the game that might benefit from this, or I will say that are more likely to benefit from this from some of the others. For example, Japanese cruisers, right? Japanese cruisers have typically a very strong torpedo armament. Learning how to put that ship in a position where you can master it is not necessarily an easy skill, but you can get there, and this makes it maybe perchance a little easier to land your torpedoes. You're probably not going to see a lot of people take this in a cruiser tree. This is if you're destroyer skills, you like 1 point destroyer skill, sure. But in a cruiser, nah, I don't think so. Certainly not a heavy cruiser. Most heavy cruisers don't have long enough range torpedoes to really get a lot of use out of this. Consumables Specialist. Now, the old Jack of all trades, the Tier 2 skill Jack of all trades, is gone. And this is kind of what they've tried to replace it with. But previously, Jack of all trades worked on all consumables. Worked on your damage control party, it worked on your radar, it worked on your heal, it worked on your spotter plane, whatever. All of that stuff. Now they've narrowed in the list of skills that you can, list of consumables that you can get that benefit with. You see it here, your aircraft consumables. If your cruiser has aircraft facilities, you can get 10% reduction on fighter or spotting aircraft, and then it's 10% faster reload on defensive fire, or main battery reload, or torpedo reload. Now, the torpedo reload for a cruiser is pretty questionable. There's only like, 2-3 cruisers in the whole game maybe that have that skill. It's like Irian and Huangme, I think, are probably it. There might be one I'm forgetting. Main battery reload booster, again, useful for the French, not really useful for anybody else. So for most cruiser lines, this is not a great skill. I certainly wouldn't bother taking this on a Hindenburg. Even if I was to build my Hindenburg out completely for defensive, for like AA build, I still don't think I would take this skill. Even for 1 point, I think there's better places to invest. But this is kind of where they've gone with it. For me, probably the default 1-point skill, certainly for basically any heavy cruiser in World of Warships these days, is going to be this one right here. We used to call this Expert Loader. Wargaming now calls this Gun Feeder. Basically, when you want to switch from AP to HE or back again, or if you're Italian, SAP, then for 1 point, it's really, really hard to top this skill. This is a fabulous place to spend a point, especially on a heavy cruiser. On a light cruiser, debatable. Probably not amazing, but certainly on a heavy cruiser, really, really good skill. Incoming Fire Alert is probably the other place that you might see cruiser captains spending their little 1 point. Now, this skill pretty much hasn't changed. This was always a 1 point skill. It's still a 1 point skill. The functionality hasn't changed. I won't pretend. I've almost never used this skill, and yet I talk to people who absolutely live by it and love it. And if you love it, and it's still here. So have fun with it. For me, I typically don't invest points here, but it's still cheap, and with the talent changes, I might mess around and see if I like it. So I might try it sometime, especially over the next month when you can literally respec your captains for free for a while. Last is Last Stand. If you're a destroyer captain, you're very familiar with Last Stand. It used to be a 2-point skill. Now it is a 1-point skill. Essentially, while your engine or rudder is disabled, you retain some speed and some maneuvering capability. It is reduced. I want to say it's 30% or 40%. There is maybe 50%. There is some reduction in your maneuverability and your speed, but you retain the ability to use them at all. This is actually really nice because what you don't see on this tier that you used to see is preventive maintenance, right? Preventive maintenance, largely a skill you typically find on destroyers. A lot of destroyer captains sometimes take that skill because it just reduces across the board the chance that your modules will get incapacitated. Cruisers here in the cruiser tree no longer has access to that skill. So this is about as good as it's going to get if you're trying to stave off, getting your engine knocked out. Now, again, with cruisers, this is a hit or miss skill. There are some mid-tier heavy cruisers, certainly in the German line. I'm looking at you, York and Hipper, that seem to get their engines knocked out constantly. It seems like any time I take an HE salvo from a battleship in my Hipper or my York, my engine goes out. So for 1 point, those two captains, for example, that might be a place I'd spend this skill. Light cruisers, again, like mid-tier light cruisers, might be something worth looking into. But generally, probably not a very popular skill in the cruiser tree. Moving up to the second tier, over all the way on the left, we go back, we have Pyrotechnician. Once upon a time, this was called Demolition Expert, and it had a bigger bonus. They've now cut the bonus back, but it's also... so they just cut the bonus back, right? It's a little cheaper for less bonus. You just get a straight up 1% chance to your main battery HE shell chance. Now, for some cruisers, again, I'm looking at mostly light cruisers, fire spammers like Atlanta, Worcester, Cleveland, those kinds of things. The Russian light cruisers, the Russian 152mm armed cruisers. This is a great place to spend 2 points. For a heavy cruiser, probably not. Depends on the cruiser, but likely not. So yeah, you've got the skill still available. It used to be a 3-point skill kind of over on the right-hand side of the tree. Now a 2-pointer back over here on the left with a slightly less bonus. Still have access to what we used to call Torpedo Armament Expert. This was a 3-point skill before. It is now a 2-point skill. Again, for a cruiser, you're probably not going to invest points here. Just like this torpedo skill up here in Tier 1, there are some torpedo-armed cruisers that you might consider this on. Again, I'm looking at the Japanese, possibly Kitakami, if she ever comes to the game, actually comes to the game. Those kinds of things. There are some cruisers out there that you might want to consider this on. But most cruiser torpedoes in World of Warships are kind of last-ditch, brawly, I'm going out, I'm taking you with me kind of weapons. This skill is of minimal use at best. So now, again, we talked about what they did with Jack of all trades. They kind of reduced what it was useful on here down at Tier 1. There's a similar skill at Tier 2, but it goes now in the other direction. It takes some of the consumables that, used to be we could reduce the cooldown on it. Now what we're doing is we're increasing the duration of it. You see here, hydroacoustic search, surveillance radar, smoke, and engine boost all get just a straight up 10% duration boost across the board. This does stack, by the way, if you with any of those module upgrades that you put in that increase the duration of engine boost or surveillance radar or hydroacoustic search. As an example, with this skill, I went over and looked on Worcester, or I actually looked at it on Minotaur. With this skill and the surveillance radar upgrade on Minotaur, Minotaur now has almost a 53-second radar duration at Tier 10. So, wow. There are ships, again, the heavy utility light cruisers that I think this is a fabulous skill on. Something like a Worcester or a Minotaur, Plymouth, that kind of ship. Other ships, it's going to depend, right? Is this a skill you're going to take on your Stalingrad? Probably not, right? Probably not. Yeah, the surveillance radar bonus is nice, but is it worth 2 points? Questionable. We'll have to see. There will be people that do it, right? Certainly in competitive formats, every little advantage is worthwhile, and there will be people that do it. But I think for an everyday build, this is going to be really popular skill for certain ships, and then other ships are going to like, nah, I don't think so. This one's brand new, called Eye in the Sky. This is a spotting aircraft specific skill. So if you remember Tier 7 Premium Russian light cruiser Lazo. Her gimmick is that she has a little like extra spotter aircraft, and they're quicker. They reload faster, and they're up less. And so, in other words, their duration in the air is less, but they come back much quicker. It allows her to play kind of a standoffy game where she sits probably outside her actual main battery range, and then is able to put that little spotter aircraft up for 30, 40, 50 seconds at a time. But it reloads like very quickly. I think it's like 30 seconds or something. Eye in the Sky here basically aims to provide a similar utility to any cruiser in the game that has access to spotting aircraft. Interesting. There are some interesting ships that I would consider this on. Perth is a fabulous example. Tier 6 Premium Commonwealth Cruiser Perth is a prime candidate for a skill like this. So there are other corner cases where I feel like it might be really useful. Looking at a Hindenburg, right? I've gotten to where I play my Hindenburg with spotting aircraft instead of fighter. I actually strongly considered this skill on my Hindenburg now, and I probably will derp around with it at some point to try it out. So again, for certain ships, you'll find a use for this skill. Is it going to be something you're going to reach for all the time? No. It's a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. And also, again, it's also a skill not applicable to every cruiser because they don't all have aircraft facilities. Priority Target. Now, this Priority Target, we've had this in the game for a while. Used to be a 1-point skill. Tells you how many people are looking at you, right, when you're turning or whatever. It is the same skill. Functionality has not changed. Now a 2-point skill. I find this interesting. To me, it's an acknowledgement of how powerful this skill always has been, and kind of I've always felt like Wargaming kind of undervalued it in the old system, and now they apparently agree. They've moved it up, and it costs a little more. This is a skill that I used to take by default on just about every ship that I played. Almost every ship that I played. And I feel like now that it costs 2 points, there's going to be ships that I don't take it on. Certainly, it's a less attractive skill for battleships now. Cruisers, I'm probably still going to want this on my Minotaur, for example, right? Heavy cruisers, depends. We'll have to see. But Priority Target's still here, unchanged, just a little more expensive. And last, we have Expert AA Marksman. Now, this is an interesting skill. It increases the number of flak bursts your ship puts up. For some ships, that's pretty awesome. And it also increases the damage that your priority sector focus does as well. Now, on its own, this skill doesn't look all that amazing. However, there are absolutely ships I'm going to take this on. Again, I'll come back to Minotaur. This is a skill I'm going to take on Minotaur, right? More flak bursts, better priority damage. Heck yeah, sign me up. Minotaur already, the way I build my Minotaur out, she eats planes. I've got a recent replay on the channel where you can see me blow away 60 planes in a match. I love doing that. And yeah. So I'm all about this skill on certain ships. Looking at it from Hindenburg's perspective, because German AA range is kind of artificially deflated in this game, probably not a skill I would look at on a German cruiser, probably not a skill I would look at on an Italian cruiser. But for a lot of other cruisers, this is actually not a bad option, especially for 2 points. Moving up to the Tier 3 skills, we have Heavy HE and SAP Shells. Now this is a very oddball skill. For starters, you see there, you're getting a 10% bonus to your HE and or SAP shells. There is no cruiser in the game that currently has access to both of these shell types. It's either one or the other. If you're an Italian heavy cruiser, you have SAP. If you're basically any other non-British light cruiser, you have HE, period. Okay. In order to get this little bonus, though, you have to give up 15%. Actually, let me phrase that. If you have 6-inch guns or better, basically 150mm guns or better, you have to give up 15% of your detectability. Ouch. Just ouch. So I don't know, man. Again, I feel like this one bears some testing. This is a no-brainer skill for some of the really like super lightly armed cruisers. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but a ship like Smolensk is absolutely going to invest in this skill. Why would you not? There's no penalty. It's a straight-up damage bonus to your HE shells. Atlanta, same thing. Flint, same thing. We'll talk about Flint's range problems in a different video. But again, from a shell perspective, why would you not take this? Like, for 3 points, it's a straight-up damage buff, okay? With no penalty. For most light cruisers, though, that start in that 6-inch gun classification, now you start having to make some difficult choices. Certainly no British light cruiser is ever going to look at this skill. But is it a skill worth considering, say, on something let's look at a super cruiser, right? Let's look at like Alaska or a Yoshino. Now it starts to look a little more intriguing, right? Yes, those ships, stealth is always powerful in this game, right? Always. It will always be powerful to not be spotted by the enemy because you're allowed to do pretty much whatever you want. But there are corner cases where I could point to that I think this skill is worth trying, right? And that's the thing I want to highlight about this video, and I'm going to say this in all of the various ones I'm going to do here. Try stuff, right? For the next month, you literally have free captain respecs. You can build a captain out, try it, and go, no, that skill is garbage, I don't want it. And blow that build away and try something different. Don't be afraid to try new things, okay? Now's the time. Well, they're not charging you doubloons, they're not charging you anything to try any captain skill build you want in the game. So if you want to try something crazy or something stupid, now's the time. Give it a go. Plug it in, hop into a random battle, go try it out, okay? So yeah, again, heavy HE shells, heavy SAP shells, potentially intriguing. I'll have to think about this some more. Last of the torpedo focus skills is Enhanced Torpedo Explosive Charge. This is just a straight up buff to torpedo damage. Again, as I've been saying on the other torpedo skills that have preceded it, not many cruisers are going to take this skill. The kind of thing you might look at with a Japanese cruiser, possibly some of the British cruisers, like maybe Minotaur, maybe. Those kinds of things. But most cruisers will probably avoid this skill. Adrenaline Rush. We're all familiar with Adrenaline Rush. It's been in the tree for 4 years. This was one of the big skills they added back in the original rework in 6.0. Was a 2-point skill, now a 3-point skill. Same functionality. Exact same thing. So all the ships that you used to take Adrenaline Rush on before, you're going to want to take Adrenaline Rush on now, which is, by the way, guys, in case you haven't been paying attention, pretty much every cruiser you can think of wants to take this skill. And it costs you extra captain point, which is, unfortunate, but I think it's an acknowledgement that, yes, this skill was underpriced in the previous system. Heavy AP shells. Now, this is a very specific skill. You see there, damage of main battery AP shells with a caliber of 190 millimeters and above. So, what we're talking about is heavy cruiser armor-piercing rounds get a 5% bonus. There are very few heavy cruisers in this game that I would consider taking this skill on. For 3 points, this does not feel amazing. This is a skill I'm going to play around with a little bit. I'll show you real quickly. Is that the one? No. I don't know what to do. I'll just do something here. This is a skill that I'm going to play around with a little bit on Hindenburg, because you see there, her AP shell damage goes from 5,900 per shell to 6,300 per shell. Again, straight up 5% bonus, or 6,200. Okay, that's noteworthy. That's interesting. This is another skill that I think of a ship like Stalingrad or Alaska would really salivate over, right? Puerto Rico, those kinds of, the super cruisers absolutely look at this skill and go, oh, yes, right? So definitely some corner cases where I think this is going to be a fabulous skill, but the overwhelming majority of the ships that are out there, light cruiser, like no light cruiser is going to take this. They don't get benefit from it, right? As an example. So, if this was just a straight up buff to AP shells regardless of caliber, every British light cruiser in the game would be like, oh yeah, sign me up. But of course they've caliber restricted it, so it's not so amazing. But again, there are definitely some corner cases worth investigating this on. Next we have Superintendent. You know what this does. Was a 3-point skill before, still a 3-point skill now. +1 card charge to your consumables across the board. Ships that you used to take this on, you're going to want to take it on again. Most high-tier cruisers get that extra heal, for example. A ship like a Minotaur, a Worcester, where you want that extra utility, definitely worth considering. And then, of course, last, Survivability Expert. Again, this skill completely unchanged. A 3-point skill for 350 HP per tier. Not a tremendously popular skill in cruisers that don't just in cruisers in general. I will say that I take this skill on pretty much all of my British light cruisers, just because not only does it increase their HP, but it also increases the strength of that ridiculous British light cruiser heal they get at high tiers. So, like Minotaur, for example, loves this skill. Edinburgh loves this skill. Plymouth, less so, but still, okay? So, again, ships you used to take it on probably will want to still consider it on. And last but not least, we get into the tier 4 skills. Now, here's where things start to really kind of look interesting, because there's some skills up here that are completely new in their design and very unlike anything we've seen before. First here, we have Top Grade Gunner. This is a straight-up secondary battery reload buff. What? And then it also increases your main battery reload speed after an enemy has been spotted within the standard detectability range. Now, I'm not sure what that means. I think it means that if an enemy ship is spotted in your detection radius, in the sense of that let's say it's an enemy cruiser and you're hard spotting each other on the surface, you get an 8% main battery reload buff. So this sounds, on the face of it, and especially with that secondary battery reload buff, this starts to sound like a skill that a brawly style of cruiser would enjoy. Certainly, again, I come back to a ship potentially like an Alaska that doesn't mind getting in close with her bow armor and her guns, those kinds of things. Maybe a Hindenburg, right? Maybe this is a decent skill for the German cruisers. I don't know. I feel like this is a very niche skill that not many cruisers are going to take, and probably not many people are even going to experiment with because of it. It seems to be worded very badly. I got to figure out how this thing actually works. But Brawly Hindenburg might be a thing. I might try this skill out and derp around with it and just see what it does. Next, we have Outnumbered. Improves the ship's characteristics if there are more visible hostile ships than allies within the firing range of your main battery. This one is much easier to understand. If within your firing radius, whether you're detected or not, this one, at least to its credit, does not bank on detection, okay? So for a stealthy cruiser, this could be really useful. A Smolensk, for example, Minotaur, any of the little British light cruisers, those kinds of things. If there are more visible hostile ships than allies, you get a speed bonus and a dispersion bonus. Speed bonus is pretty nice. Speed bonus means that you're probably eventually, going to outrange those ships, so this skill will stop working. But it's some interesting dynamics here at play, depending on what ship you want to put this on and how you want to play it. So some interesting things can be done here. I'm this skill I'm a little more intrigued by. This one just feels weird. This one I'm at least going, okay, there's some ships I might try this on. Radiolocation, or the infamous RPF that 4 years ago we were told by everyone was going to destroy World of Warships as we know it, still a 4-point skill, still unchanged, still not destroying the game. Inertia Fuse for HE Shells. If you play World of Warships and you play cruisers, you're used to this skill by now. Still a 4-point skill, still functioning just as it did after the rework of this skill about a year-ish ago. They changed how this skill works. Nothing, still here, no changes here in this rework, still a 4-point skill, just like it always has been. So the ships that you used to take IFHE on, you're going to still take IFHE on, right? Worcester, Cleveland, all your little Russian 6-inch gun cruisers, all those things, still take IFHE, no big deal. Concealment Expert. Again, just like it's always been, a straight up 10% buff to your concealment. Most cruisers in the game will want to take this. There are a handful that I would say, questionable, but most of them are going to want to take this. And then last but not least, AA Gunner. Now, I love the idea of this skill. I really do. And in fact, I feel like when I looked at this build back on one of the original builds back on Test Center, this was a 2-point skill in the cruiser tree. And I remember thinking, 2 points for 20% AA buff? Hell yes, sign me up. Now it's a 4-point skill. So now I feel like it's going to be the kind of thing that you're going to pick up on certain ships and certain builds, but probably not by default. For example, here on Hindenburg, I would probably avoid this skill for much the same reason that I would avoid Expert AA Marksman for only 2 points, and that's because of Hindenburg's artificially gimped 5.2 kilometer firing range for her AA. This is a great skill for a Worcester with a 6.9 kilometer AA range, or a Minotaur for the same reason, right? Cleveland, almost all the American cruisers, I will absolutely try this skill on and then decide for myself if I want to keep it. But, because they're AA range, they're AA boats. Do I want to do this on the Italian cruisers? No, I don't think so. 4.6 kilometer range. So to me, you have to consider, this is a great skill, and the number benefit can look really good. Let's just show you out here. 20% here, pretty sexy, right? Yeah, the flak explosions hit harder, and then now more AA. On the face of it, I love this skill, but I feel like it's definitely going to be one that I only put on select ships just because of the range limitations that they've put on things. To me, just off the top of my head, I'd probably say anything under 5.8 kilometers, I would probably not likely invest in this skill on, just because I just don't feel like I'm going to be getting much use out of it. But there are absolutely ships in this game that I will put this on, because remember, guys, AA, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, AA in this game is a numbers race, period. Anything you can do to buff your continuous AA damage is to your benefit. The goal is you have to try and outrace the carrier player with his buffs to his plane health, right? So anything you can do to up your AA, if you want to meaningfully damage planes and piss off the carrier player, this is the kind of stuff you got to do and the kind of stuff you got to invest in. Anyway, guys, there's our quick look through the cruiser tree. I'm going to be doing some stuff on Twitch this week, starting tonight. Come on by, have a chat. We'll talk through some more of these builds. I'll actually build out a few ships. We'll play them on stream and see how it goes. In the meantime, wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.